Before beginning, I want to honor and recognize the Lenape people whose territory we stand on now, as well as the Mohawk ironworkers who are responsible for the building of this city, which Games for Change benefits from. So a bit about me before I talk about Thunderbird Strike, where I'm coming from. I am Anishinaabe and Métis, and I will introduce myself in my language. Ani, Wabonanong, Indigenous, Minawa, Gakakandodam, Minawa, Bawating, Indojaba, and Minawa, Nkwejang. So my name is Elizabeth LaPensée. I come from Anishinaabe people who are at Bawating. I have family at Bay Mills Indian Community. And I'm also Métis, which is also known as Michif. And I am currently living in the Lansing area of Michigan at Michigan State University. Nkwejang means where the waters meet or where one body of water flows into the next. So that would be like right in the Great Lakes area, right? The amazing thing about coming here to New York was now that I live back closer to my home territory, the flight here was really easy. I was like, oh, that was like an hour and a half. I should be here more often. That was really cool. So in terms of how I work and in terms of relationality, this is our understanding of Turtle Island, that it is all one connected land, that our communities traveled and interrelated. And so my work is all about Indigenous expression through games and comics, but primarily through games because I'm interested in game mechanics. How can we actually create game design which represents Indigenous ways of knowing? Thunderbird Strike comes from being raised with Thunderbird stories, teachings that relate that there will come a time where there will be a black snake that threatens to swallow the land and the waters whole, and that the people will call upon the Thunderbirds for help. We've seen this happening, especially during Standing Rock. How many of you are familiar with Standing Rock? Awesome. Okay, cool. I can relax a little bit. Awesome. That's great. I appreciate that. And so I was working on this game, Thunderbird Strike, before Standing Rock happened, but it is not the same pipeline that is being depicted or series of pipelines that are being depicted in Thunderbird Strike. There are others, but all the stories are interrelated, and our understanding is that the stories are coming to be. In terms of my process, I was an artist on Thunderbird Strike. It's a 2D side-scroller, and this is the kind of work that I do. So everything is drawn by hand. Thunderbird Strike, like some of my other work, is a pixel by pixel stop motion animation at 6 frames per second. So when you see my work, it means I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's very painstaking, which is what I do as an artist, is suffer. Thunderbird Strike certainly lived up to the testament of suffering as an artist. I got a small arts grant while I was living in Minnesota. Part of the Minnesota waterways and pipelines are depicted in the game. There are photo textures that come from the waters of Minnesota in the game. And so I had written this grant, a fellowship, which I received from the Arrowhead Arts Council, and they were very gracious in supporting me in that work. And then I just did what any artist would do. I worked on a little game. You can play it in 15 minutes. All right, you do play as a Thunderbird, striking lightning down at mining company buildings and the big giant mining trucks. Apparently, some people took issue to that, namely oil lobbyists, who then alerted senators, who then proceeded to ensure that there was an audit on me and tried to implement a new law in Minnesota to dictate that any funding that is about to be distributed will be looked at by the Senate, and that the Senate themselves have the final say in what is going to be accepted and supported. There was huge backlash, thank goodness. There was a rise happening at the time. There were people gathering at the banks of Wells Fargo and shutting them down, which didn't really help, as senators were meeting in rooms, naming me, and naming this little game that, quite honestly, I intended to give to my family members, to my community members, a native festival or two. And that was about it. That was the range. It's a free game. That was the plan. And before I knew it, although they did not know about one another at the time, simultaneously, there was just this rising crash where I received Best Digital Media at Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival, which is the most incredible honor I could receive. Those are my peers. That festival happens in Toronto, Ontario. I couldn't be there because my auntie had passed on, so I had not even been able to accept this award. And as I was getting this information that I had received this award, that's when the oil lobbyists were going after me and the senators were going after me as well. They didn't know about one another, but this is how things happen, especially when you deal with Thunderbirds. Then I was on Fox News. Oh man, that was great. And of course, despite the fact that the gameplay is very balanced, there are both restoration and destruction points. You have complete sovereignty as the player to strike lightning where you want, when you want, and everything that you strike at has equal point value, right? And by the way, okay, so you do have the ability to strike lightning down at mining infrastructure. You can also strike lightning at the bones of caribou, wolves, and buffalo, all of whom are being threatened by the tar sands extraction process. And when you do that, you revive them. They come back to life. Certainly Fox News wasn't going to show that part of the game. So before you know it, I was being accused of being an eco-terrorist, of inciting eco-terrorism, and in fact, training eco-terrorists. To which I can only say, unless y'all are gonna turn into Thunderbirds and start striking lightning, I think we're gonna be okay. However, as this was happening, I had this game on a Dropbox link, right? Okay, just, it's on a Dropbox link. It got so many downloads that the link crashed because I didn't even have a paid account. The poor artist over here, I was like, oh, I guess I should pay for Dropbox now. Okay. And that was great. People were playing the game. It was amazing, and I got incredible feedback. Of course, because I am Anishinaabe and Métis, first and foremost, the feedback that I cared about was from my elders, from community members, from people who had seen me develop the game all along. But beyond that, it started to reach a much wider audience. And in fact, it did, I believe, do what I had hoped for with this game, which was to simply share Thunderbird teachings, our stories, and to draw attention to the Line 5 pipeline, which has already spilled oil, by the way. This is not like I'm saying these threats might happen. They are happening. They have been happening. They have to stop. In the context that this game has 3 levels, not a big game. However, there is painstaking attention to detail in this game. The background you see here is actually made out of textures made from the tires of the mining company trucks. Because just as I am Anishinaabe and Métis, my children, who I've been raising on my own for several years now, are also Beaver Lake Cree Nation. So the reason why this game has a pathway from the tar sands to the Great Lakes is because that is my connection. That is my thinking for the next generations. Beaver Lake Cree Nation is right near Fort McMurray, where the tar sands are happening, and they're greatly impacted by the toxins. I went there to do a documentary for National Geographic, and there's a building there for Syncrude, and it was like a Lord of the Rings movie. And it was like walking into Mordor and the eye of the storm coming down right above Syncrude with yellow-gray, sick clouds and constant lightning just because of what they've done to the land, because of how it's been stripped. In the second level, you travel through Saskatchewan and you see the pipelines that are being put in place at this moment. And finally, you have your great old boss fight, where you're fighting a pipeline in the shape of a snake. The thing about this game is, you always win. There's no losing. You never get hit by anything. Because you know what? My mentor, my great mentor, Alan Turner, he's Lakota and Black and worked for AAA and has done games like Edragor, which is been referred to as the D&D, indigenous version of D&D. He said, well, you know, something should probably be attacking the Thunderbirds because that's the expectation of game industry, is that you have some kind of force. And I was like, for real? You know, he carries Thunderbird teachings too, so I was like, really? What do you think would happen if Thunderbirds were just like, we're gonna come just mess this all up? We're just gonna do this. No, cops aren't gonna show up. Military's not gonna show up and be like shooting at the Thunderbirds. No, it's like over, man. The Thunderbirds have come. And in fact, in our teachings, they are here already, and they are among us. So this is Dylan Miner and artwork from him. The only text that appears in the game and the criticism and the accusation that I am an activist or a terrorist is not my wording. It actually comes from a man. And of course, would they target a man? No. They're going to target a woman. But this is Dylan Miner, so he's credited for this work. And this is the thing about this game, is that it goes far beyond me. This is not about me depicting my vision. This is, in fact, about representing my communities, checking in with elders, checking in with storytellers, and representing the people and what our hopes are. This game is sovereign because I worked on it independently. It was funded by a small amount of grant funding, which is what I was audited about. I proved myself to be in the right. The law to attempt to silence games as art was shut down. However, the battle is still ongoing. The current bill that is being pushed through, and of course naturally because of how it's being worded, is to say that anyone who uses government funding through the arts to depict or encourage what they're now referring to as domestic terrorism or civil disobedience will receive a civil penalty of up to 10 times the amount that you were given. This cannot apply retroactively to me, but it would mean someone like me, a mother raising my children entirely on my own, only just recently became a professor. I've been doing the freelance life for a very long while. It's the first time that I get a check like on the first of the month and you're like, whoa, that money just showed up for real. It's actually happening, right? I would owe $36,000 to the government because I told an indigenous story. The hope then is that we can continue to work with this idea of sovereign games to develop design and mechanics which relate to our teachings on our own terms, to raise our own funding, to look to tribal funding, but also primarily to look to funding from other people. Because it is not a situation where we should be going to tribes or nations and saying, you know what's gonna fix you up? Games. You know what's gonna make you money? Games. No, it's a loss, man. What are you talking about? Am I here because I wanna make money? No. I'm gonna hustle. I'm gonna do the work that I wanna do because this is how I express my voice, and this is the importance of it. with hope that in the next generations, we will see a time where, like my grandparents who are still alive, they're 85 and 83, and they still travel up north, they remember a time when you could put your hands in the Straits of Mackinac and you could drink the water. And we cannot do that now, and I cannot foresee that in my lifetime. But maybe in my children's lifetime, maybe in the next generations, we can have that hope again. Miigwech.